Welcome everyone to this webinar on going to Toronto on the International Experience Calendar in 2023. You're very welcome. My name is Sarah. I'm with Crosscare Irish Diaspora Support Project. And this evening we will be going through everything you need to know about making the most of your International Experience Calendar over in Toronto. We'll talk a little bit about who we are and what we do. Preparing for your arrival then, employment, networking. We'll touch on health, well-being and minding your mental health. We'll also talk a little bit about getting settled in Toronto and you'll have contact details for us. And then we will go into a short Q&A where you can ask questions. If you think of questions during the presentation, please feel free to pop them into the chat box and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. I would really encourage you to do this. It's your opportunity to ask the experts the questions that you're dying to know answers to. So please go ahead and pop your questions in the chat. We would ask you to keep your microphone muted and switch off your camera if you prefer not to be visible, as this is being recorded. And as I said earlier, the slides will be available after the webinar, so don't worry too much about taking notes. So the two organisations running this evening's webinar are Crosscare Irish Diaspora Support Project. I'm joined this evening by my colleague Lucia, who's our communications officer. And what we do is we provide specialised information, advocacy support for Irish people who are either moving abroad, such as yourselves, or Irish people returning to Ireland from abroad. Some of the information we provide is around navigating the Irish immigration system on return, and we also link in with Irish support organisations around the world, like the Irish Canadian Immigration Centre, who are based in Canada. They assist Irish diaspora from across the island of Ireland. They offer outreach and information in 3 key areas. That's the immigration system in Canada, employment guidance and resources, social services navigation, and associated inequities. This evening, we're joined by Kathy Murphy, who's the Executive Director, and Gillian Goulding. You're both very welcome. We're delighted to have you. There we are. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Kathy, who will go through preparing for your arrival.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah, and welcome everyone. So I'm speaking to you this evening from Toronto. It hasn't quite hit spring here yet. I don't know when you're all planning on arriving, but we're expecting some good weather, hopefully by May. We get a very late spring here. So I am the Executive Director, and if you're coming to Toronto, then I will be welcoming you here along with our team here in Toronto. The first thing we'd like to talk to you about is your port of entry letter. So if you have already applied for your IEC and your application has been successful, you should now have in your possession your port of entry letter. And with that letter, you will get a whole list from the IEC called, prepare for arrival. I'm going to go over some of those things, but we would signpost you back to that email and the package you get so there's no stone left unturned. Remember that you need to carry your port of arrival letter with you to Canada. You also need to have a passport with at least 2 years validity on it. Now, we talk about this because at the port of entry, when you arrive at Toronto Pearson International Airport, when the border officer issues your work permit, which is the visa document that allows you to work in Canada for the 2 years, he or she will ask to see your passport. If your passport doesn't have 2 years on it, you will only be issued a work permit that matches the validity end date on your passport. It is possible to extend later under certain very specific conditions. We don't recommend that at all. There's no guarantee. So make sure you go and get your passport up to date now. And if you need to do that and you've already got your port of entry letter, get in touch with me after this webinar and I'll talk to you about what you need to do to update your other documents. It's really important to know that your ETA, your electronic travel authorization, that is tied to your passport rather than your work permit. So if you have an IEC port of entry letter, you already have an ETA. That's already linked to your passport. That will have been done as part of your IEC application. If you do need to update your passport now or in the future, you will need to get a new ETA, and the onus of that is on you. So make sure that you do that. So what can you expect when you get off the plane in Toronto? You will go through immigration, and you will be directed to an immigration officer who will look at your documents. So like I said, you have to have your port of entry letter, you must have your passport with 2 years validity, you'll have to have your electronic travel authorization matching your passport. Now, something we advise everybody to do before they leave the immigration desk, not before you leave the airport, but before you actually step away from the immigration officer, when she or he hands you your hard copy of your work permit for your 2 years work authority in Canada, just take a minute, stand there and read over the entire document. You're checking for a few things. Have they got your name correct? Is everything spelled correctly? Any personal information on there at all? Is it in fact correct? And most important, have they got the end date correct on your work permit? If they've shorted you on your work permit, it would normally be for one of two things. One, because your passport was not valid for 2 years, or two, because your health and travel insurance was not valid for 2 years. So they are within their rights to deny you a full work permit for the 2-year period if you don't have either of those things in place. If you presented them with your 2 years proof of travel insurance and your passport is valid for 2 years, you should be getting a 2-year work permit. If there's any issue at all with that, you can politely ask the officer to have another look. And if she or he refuses to do so, you are within your rights to politely ask to speak to a supervisor because you think there's been an error. Worst case scenario, they won't fix it for you there. And once you get into Toronto, you'll give me a call, but make sure you do that within a couple of days. If it's a weekend, call us first thing on the Monday morning. This can still be corrected and it's not a problem, but you want to do it as quickly as possible. So that's just to give you a little heads up. If you have these tools in your kit, you're going to have a much easier entrance to Canada. And for most of you, there'll be no issue whatsoever. Now, I've talked briefly about the 2 years travel insurance, which is part of the International Experience Canada Agreement. By law, you must have this insurance, and you will need to present it to the border officer when you get to Toronto. Again, if you only have 1 year, you will only be given 1 year of your work permit, and you cannot extend. So if you want to come for the 2 years, go ahead now and book and pay for the 2 years travel insurance. We'll be talking about this a bit later. Don't cancel that insurance once you get into Canada. By law, you have entered into an agreement with the Canadian government that says you will carry this insurance for the 2 years of the privilege of working in Canada. And also, should you have to go to hospital here, they are well within their rights to ask to see your international insurance before they provide any service to you. Jillian will talk to this a little bit later. Proof of funds. So again, on your prepare for arrival email from the IEC, they will talk to you about proof of funds. You are supposed to carry proof of 2,500 Canadian, that's Canadian dollars. And you would carry that via a letter directly from your bank, no more than 7 days old. That's what you have to have. Jillian and I will tell you, you need far more. Now, how much is case specific to each person, but keep in mind a few things. Once you get here, you have to pay for your temporary accommodation, whether you've booked into a hostel, whether you've got an apartment sublet, whether you're staying at a hotel or an Airbnb, you've got to pay for that. Once you lock down more long-term accommodation, if you're in an apartment, rental housing, you're going to have to pay first and last month's rent from the very beginning, and sometimes you'll have to pay even more. Something else to keep in mind is that Canadian apartments, with the exception of a sublet, and we can talk more about that if you have questions, or Airbnb, you don't get furniture here with a Canadian apartment. So you will have to buy furniture. You can get cheap furniture, used furniture, Facebook Marketplace, Kijiji, IKEA. There's all sorts of options, but you will need to have cash to hand for that. So the bare minimum that you have to carry with you is $2,500. I mean, please get that transferred over electronically, but you probably want much more, again, for ease of settlement when you arrive here. Okay, Sarah, next slide, please. So one of the most important things you're going to want to think about even before you get here is what you're going to do for work in Canada. So the first thing that we would invite you to do, now that you've done this seminar, is please do sign up for our free weekly employment webinar. It happens every single Tuesday afternoons. That's 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. So it's a little bit later. It's about 7:30 in Ireland. We offer it on a weekly basis. Just like you signed up in advance for this one, you're very welcome to sign up, and it is, of course, free. And what can you expect from that? You will learn how to interview in Canada. It's very different than interviewing in Ireland, believe it or not. You'll learn how to Canadianize your resume. We don't do a CV here. We do a very short resume, 1 to 2 pages, in a very different style than you're used to presenting to a potential employer in Ireland. Getting this right is key. If you handed a Canadian employer an Irish-style CV, you will not get called in for an interview. You'll also learn the importance of networking. So getting a job in Canada, with very few exceptions, unless you're in construction or hospitality, it will come down to networking. It won't come down to the fact that you applied for 500 jobs online. You're going to have to get out and get yourself introduced into your sector here. And the easiest way to do that is by meeting other Irish who come before you, who will be very, very willing to meet you for a coffee and talk to you about your sector. So if you're in the financial sector, start using LinkedIn now. When you get here, attend any community events that are going on. Join the Ireland-Canada Chamber of Commerce. Join the Canada-Ireland Foundation Young Professionals events. I think it's now called Network Ireland. This is all going to be really important to getting your foot in the door to getting an interview in Canada. So all of that will be covered in our webinar, and you're very welcome to join us. If you're going to work in the hospitality sector, you do need to sign up for SmartServe. It's different in every single province. I think in British Columbia, they call it Serving It Right. Here in Ontario, they call it SmartServe. And this means that if you are going to be working in an establishment where alcohol is served, and in particular, if you are a bartender or you're going to be waiting tables, you must have this certificate to serve alcohol in Ontario. And it's going to be the same anywhere you go in Canada, but the license is different province to province. So you can go ahead and look at that now before you even get over here if you want to be server ready as soon as you hit the ground here. For the construction industry, we would advise you to reach out to people before you get here, talk to friends who have already moved over here. If you're part of the GAA, that's just about the best place to meet construction industry contacts. And you can, of course, come into us and we can have a chat as well. I should tell you that we have a free coffee morning here on a Thursday. So depending on what day of the week that you land in Canada, and in Toronto in particular, you might want to pop in, have a cup of coffee or tea with us and a donut, a special treat for our new arrivals, and have a chat about just a few questions that might pop up for you. But the employment piece will be key. And that you can register for in advance by going to our event page on our website. Let's talk briefly about your social insurance number. This is a number that you will have to have in order to work in Canada. And when you go for a Canadian interview, they will ask for your social insurance number. First, they'll ask if you have one. And then once you're offered the job, when you sign your contract, you will have to present them with this number. You get this number through Service Canada. So once you've arrived in Canada and you have a valid work permit, you can go to a Service Canada kiosk anywhere in the Greater Toronto area, and you will be issued with that number. You do have to take your work permit and your passport with you. Now, depending what time you land at Pearson International Airport in Toronto, you may in fact be able to visit the Service Canada kiosk at the airport. It'll depend on the day of the week and the time that you land. If you can do that, it will make things so much easier for you. And it's actually a great way for you to ensure that your work permit is correct, because Service Canada, they will flag any issue with your work permit. So if there's a problem, you can pop back over to immigration and have a chat. A couple of things to highlight. We have a podcast page. We're now on Spotify, and we would urge all of you to listen to one podcast in particular before you come over. And that is called The Irish Advantage. And it's a podcast we did a few years ago with Ian Kinsella from Morgan McKinley. And honestly, regardless of what sector you are in, this podcast will really, really help you in advance of coming here, because it talks about understanding the necessity of networking to get your career role in Canada. So please do have a listen, and we look forward to welcoming you in Toronto. And I'm going to pass this over now to Gillian, who is our National Social Care Advisor.
Thanks, Kathy. Hey everyone, so nice to virtually meet you all, and hopefully I'll meet you someday in Toronto too. So I'm actually based in Vancouver, so I'm on the ICANN team that's based over in Vancouver, but like Kathy, I provide my services across Canada and to Irish people before they move to Canada, so you can get in touch with me anytime too. So yeah, today I'm going to talk to you briefly about health, well-being and mental health supports when you move to Canada. So moving to a new country, I've obviously done it myself. You know, there can be a lot of different services compared to at home. So it's just my main part of the role here is to support Irish people when they move to Canada, to figure out the healthcare system here, because it is a bit different, figure out, you know, how to find different health, general health, mental health and well-being supports based on your own individual needs. You know, the internet can be an overwhelming place. You can just type into Google and a lot of different services can come up. So through this work, we would know about different services in the different cities across Canada. And if you decide to move to another area of Canada, again, that's no problem too. We can also support you look into services there. So just to give you a little idea of some of the services that people ask me about generally, the number one thing is counselling. I think when you're an immigrant, definitely a lot of people usually decide to like do a bit of work on themselves when they move abroad. In Canada, once you're working full time, a lot of the time you get benefits here, health and dental benefits. So part of that can be going towards counselling, massage therapy, acupuncture, going to the dentist. So when people actually see that that's on their benefits, that also prompts people to think, oh, maybe I'll do some counselling. So that's one of the number one things people get in touch with me about. It can look very expensive when you Google it, but depending on your salary and what your individual needs are, there's a lot of low cost counselling available too, and I can signpost people to those services. And also, if you're an Irish person living abroad, there's actually free counselling services available as well. So that's the main one that people generally get in touch about. But other ones are, you know, people are looking how to find a doctor here. It can be a bit different. Addiction supports, people get in touch with often about, and just general mental health supports, you know, trying to figure out what the mental health support system is like here. And then you'll see on the screen other ones, hospitals, sexual health clinics, general helplines. Community centres is a huge one. People might get in touch because they're feeling a bit lonely or they're trying to make friends here. Community centres across Canada are amazing. You know, at like low cost activities that you can do, like ice skating, Zumba classes, fitness classes, and that's a great way to make friends here too. And then, like I've mentioned already, the free and low cost services. But a huge thing when Irish people move to Canada is that we actually mightn't be aware about provincial healthcare. So in Canada, in all the different provinces, there is provincial healthcare. So in Ontario, where you're going to be moving to with Toronto, it's called OHIP. So you are eligible, there's different eligibility criteria to make sure that you get OHIP on the IEC work permit. So we've actually made a guide, it's a newcomer's guide to applying for healthcare in Canada. So if you go to our essential guide page and go to upon arrival, you'll see that guide there. That goes through step by step what the eligibility criteria is for OHIP, how you can apply, when to apply, and if you've any questions on that, you can always give them a call. We've their number and their contact details there. And if you're just confused about anything on that website, just give me an email or a phone call as well, and I can go over that with you. I signpost people to apply for their OHIP straight away. Once you're eligible, you should apply straight away, because once you have your OHIP, along with having your private health insurance, once you have your OHIP, it means that you will be able to see the doctor for free. And there's also other benefits, like if you needed to go into hospital for an X-ray and different tests, it will be covered under your OHIP. But like Kathy mentioned earlier on, you do need your 2-year private health insurance. That's part of the IEC work permit requirement, and you can cancel this. Like, you know, we would strongly recommend you not to, because it is part of the legal agreement you are, you know, abiding to when you move to Canada. And like Kathy said as well, actually every time you choose to leave, you know, Canada, like if you're in Toronto, if you decide to just cross the border and go down to the States, or if you decide to fly back to Europe, then every time you leave, you need to actually, when you're coming back in, you need to have obviously your passport and your work permit, but you should also have your private health insurance information as well. Because every time you come back in to Canada, they could ask for this information. The reason it's so important is because of the 3 pieces of information on the first slide, where they're saying that you need to have medical care, hospitalization, and repatriation. So even when you get your provincial healthcare, it won't have repatriation on it as well. And even if you get health and dental benefits with your company, that won't have it either. So you really do need to keep it. And like Kathy said, make sure whatever package you go for with your health insurance, that it's valid for 2 years, because the immigration officer at border control will only give you your work permit for the amount of time your private health insurance is. So any more questions on that, definitely get in touch. And then social media, a lot of people are on social media, and, you know, it can be really beneficial to just, a lot of people spend a lot of time scrolling, but like, you know, sometimes beneficial things will pop up. So on ICANN, we have different social media platforms. We have Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And every Monday morning, we do Monday morning mental health awareness tips. So some months we'll do different campaigns, and you'll see here like the examples below. Essential steps for looking after your health and mental health while living in Canada. That's a really useful one for newcomers, because you learn about services. Positive mental health in the workplace. And lads, it's happened to us all. That's all about, like, you know, signposting men to mental health services here in Canada. Opioid awareness is a huge campaign that we run every year, and that is to make people aware about the opioid crisis that is happening across Canada. You'll see links just below here of fentanyl, naloxone. So the reason we put these here is I would advise all these links that are here. These are all hyperlinks. So you will get emailed these slides afterwards. So they're all hyperlinks. And I would advise to just click on the links and read up on them to have some awareness. Fentanyl is a very potent opioid pain reliever, and it can be mixed in with a lot of commonly used drugs like cocaine, MDMA, and pills. So it doesn't smell like anything. You can't see it, you can't taste it, but it could be mixed in with these drugs. And Canada is really pro safe drug use because they want people to be aware that this substance could be in a drug you're choosing to take. So I would advise you to read up on it, to learn about fentanyl, learn about what the signs and symptoms are of a fentanyl overdose, so you'll know how to get people help if they need it. And then look up about naloxone kits. In a lot of the pharmacies here, you will be able to get a naloxone kit for free. Naloxone kits can temporarily reverse the signs of an opioid overdose. So it's really beneficial to have it. They look like a little first aid kit. You'll see people have them on their backpacks here a lot when they go camping, hiking, or just you'll just see them on people's backpacks. So you go into the pharmacies here and you just ask to speak to the pharmacist and say, I've heard about naloxone, can you teach me more about it? They'll show you how to use a naloxone kit as well, and they're free. So I'd advise to just look up, you never know when you might need one for, a friend or someone you see. And then also Toronto's drug checking service, like I said, they're, really pro-safe drug use. If people are choosing to use drugs, they want people to know what is in their substances. So there is drug checking services where you can just bring in a few grains of whatever drug you're planning to use. You don't need to show your ID or anything. They'll just ask for your phone number and text you the results. And if you don't even want to do that, they'll actually put them on an online form. So it's just a good way of, they're still a legal drug, but it's just good for, you to know whether there seems to be traces of fentanyl in it or not. And then in Canada, cannabis is legal. So it's just good to know what the laws are about it being legal, like where it's legal to smoke cannabis or not. Because, for example, some places where you rent your accommodation, you might be able to smoke out in your patio or you mightn't. So it's just good to be aware about these laws. It can be different to Ireland, and definitely with smoking and tobacco, the laws can be quite different here. And then of course with cannabis, it is a substance just like alcohol. So a lot of people can get addicted to it. So we've also put a link here as well, just to the different addiction supports that are available to you if you needed them. And then important helplines. So if you go to our mental health resources page, these are just, it's okay to ask for help. These are just like some helpline numbers that are across Canada, and some of them are helpline back in Ireland, like the Samaritans. These are ones that I would say to just click on it when you get your new phone over here, save those numbers in your phone. They're just useful to have. You never know when you might need a helpline. We've all had to ring one. So it's just useful to have those saved in your phone. And then you'll see there under mental health resources as well, different guides on different, resources that people get in touch with us looking for information on, and different useful resources here in Canada that we want to make people aware of because they mightn't even know they're available. Like Kathy mentioned about the podcast, I'm a person who loves podcasts. I love putting in my AirPods and just going for a walk. So I think, if you are moving over, some like the essential guides on the website is amazing. There's so many guides. Use the search bar and you will find a guide for whatever you're looking for. Same on our Facebook page. Anything you're looking for and thinking about, use the search bar and type in, a few keywords, and I'm sure we will have done a post throughout the week, not just with the mental health posts. Throughout the week, there's immigration posts, housing tips is a big one, family resources, Feel at Home Friday. So I would definitely recommend doing the search bar on the Facebook and the website for any questions. But podcasts are there's so many amazing podcasts. We have them with newcomers, like Kathy mentioned. We have networking ones. We have ones on your mental health, ones talking about what the opioid crisis is. So they're all short, when they're on Spotify. So I would definitely recommend listening to some of them. And then that's our contact page there as well. And just a reminder to everyone, all of ICANN services are free and confidential. So when people get in touch with me, I always go over a consent and confidentiality agreement with them, so they understand, that things are confidential. So next slide, please, Sarah. So yeah, so then the last thing we're going to talk to you about today is settling into Toronto. So when you move over, obviously information is key. So there's loads of useful information to consider before you even leave Ireland. Don't leave it all until you just get here. So Crosscare, if you go to Crosscare's link here, they have so much useful information for you to look up before you move, and different things that you might not even think, of, like, are important to do before you leave. So I would definitely recommend going to their page here that's hyperlinked, and also get in touch with them if you have any questions. They're so, useful, such a useful resource to have, and we're so lucky to signpost people back at home to them. And then, like Kathy was saying, we have the free in-person event regularly for Irish newcomers. So it's in the ICON office, which is in downtown Toronto. So it's a great opportunity to go to those events. I'll be back over in Toronto myself in 2 weeks, and I'll get to go to one of the events. It's just a great opportunity to meet other newcomers that are in the same, position as you. They've moved to a new city and they're looking, any useful tips on getting set up in the city and make some new friends there. So, it's a great place to go and just have a cuppa and a friendly face and ask any questions you have. So you can sign up to that event with our Eventbrite. So you'll see our Eventbrite link there. And you'll see other events that we also have, like Kathy was mentioning, the webinar, the employment webinar. I'm going to second that. Really, I would strongly encourage to attend the employment webinar before you leave Ireland, just so you understand the difference in applying for work here. And if you could get your resume updated and stuff before you come, then at least if you want to have a holiday for a week or two when you first get here, brilliant. But it would be great for you to have that piece of work done before you come, and have that awareness on how important it is to change your resume over here. And then ICANN's essential guides and resources upon arrival. Like I mentioned already, there's several guides there that you can look up. Just use the search bar as well, and you will find there's probably a guide for any questions you have, and contact us with questions on those. And then, like Kathy was mentioning earlier on about accommodation. So renting accommodation here, I personally found it very different to Ireland as well. They do come, a lot of them come unfurnished. Some of them come with in-suite laundry, some of them don't. So we've actually done up a essential guide just on accommodation, just to make people aware of different questions to ask, different things to consider, different Facebook groups you can join to try and get free, items for your house, which is different to Ireland. I didn't know any of those when I was renting at home. So there is like different Facebook groups for that. And the most important one for when you're planning your tickets, if you haven't them already booked, is that most rentals start on the 1st of the month and occasionally the 15th, but mainly the 1st. So it is, like Kathy was saying, it's very useful to know this and to have temporary accommodation booked for the few weeks before you come, just to give yourself time to do the viewings and, to get to know which area you want to live in Toronto. Definitely, I would recommend not to transfer any money unless you have viewed the place or you have a trusted friend or family member in Toronto that can go and view the place. There can be a lot of scams online, so just make sure, not to fall for any of those scams, and definitely do your research before you move in. There's tenancy boards as well in Ontario that you can call. So if you have any concerns about a landlord or about a rental, you could actually call the tenancy board for free in Ontario, and you can actually ask them any questions. So that's really useful. And you'll find that link in the Know Your Rights as a Tenant. So then the last link here is just settling into Toronto. So we'll go over this as well when you come to one of our newcomers events in the ICANN office when you arrive. But that might be a little few days before you get here. Get a Presto card once you arrive. So you'll see the hyperlink here. A Presto card is kind of like the Leap card back in Ireland, but they're really useful to have because they make all the trips just more affordable and cheaper, because you can definitely tap on with your debit card or your credit card, but each trip adds up. When you have a Presto card, it just means that it's valid for a certain amount of minutes. So you could actually get like the subway, the train, and a bus if you needed to, and they might all be counted under one journey. Definitely register your card online as well. We've all lost a Leap card, and I'm sure everyone, a Presto card, it can easily fall out of your pocket. So if you register your card online here, the minute you notice you have lost it or misplaced it, you can actually freeze it online. So you can go in once it's registered, and then they'll actually give you the balance when you buy a new one once you top up. So that can be handy, because when you first move over, And if you're commuting to your job, or you know, it's good to maybe do one of the monthly plans. So it's a nice way to make sure you get the money back. Probably the most important thing on this page is apply for an Ontario photo card when you arrive. We would really recommend this because using your passport, you will get asked for ID definitely in Canada. If you're under 30 especially, you will get asked for ID because it's a requirement when you're in restaurants or bars. So having an Ontario photo card is so handy. It's like the age card at home. Because your passport, if you lose your passport, of course you can apply for a new one, but that's time, it's money, it's a lot of paperwork. And most importantly, your work permit is linked to your passport. So that's something else, another expense you're going to have to, you know, get them connected again. So I would really recommend getting an Ontario photo card. I think they're $35 and it's just really useful to have a Canadian ID then on you. Irish and You in Toronto is a Facebook group. I'm sure a lot of you are already on it. You know, there's, again, like I said, with ICANN's Facebook group, there's a lot of information on that page. I would definitely use the search bar for any question you have. It's probably already been asked in there. Use a few keywords. And I would definitely say with any Facebook group, you know, any of them, I would always say whatever the answers are and whatever the comments are, they're a great place to get the first bit of information for you to do further research on the question you had. I definitely wouldn't take any answer in a Facebook page as, you know, like gospel. I would always do your own research as well, but it's a great starting point because people are in the same situation as you, but always, you know, go on then and do your own research. The reason we say this is we often see on Facebook groups people saying, cancel your health insurance, now you have provincial healthcare. But like, you know, Kathy and I were saying, that's one that we really, you're meant to keep it. So always do your own research too. But great starting point, great information on rental accommodation, social life, you know, meetups, GA events and other social events that are happening. So really useful page for when you first move. If you're not on Facebook as well, it's really handy on our website, I Can Feel at Home When You Move to Canada. We have a list on that website page there of all the different Irish Canadian organizations here in Canada, across Canada, but of course there's a section just for Toronto and Ontario. So that's really useful. It'll list all the different GA clubs. It will list Irish dancing, you know, an Irish radio channel, and just different social groups that are on within the community. So it's good to know that they're there. Another, you know, useful one as well is meetup.com as well. When you first move to Toronto, it's a good way to meet people too. So you'll find all that information there on the website. And then the last two is the Consulate General of Ireland, Toronto. So we do have a Consulate General in Toronto, so that it's great to have the Irish Consulate there in Toronto. They've only opened recently. So it's great to have that support and for you to know that there is a consulate in Toronto should you need it. So that's the link to their page there. And also the Embassy of Ireland is in Canada as well. You know, so it's good for you to know where the embassy is and how to contact them should you ever need to get in touch with them. And I'll hand you now back to Sarah. Ask us any questions at the end or type them in the chat.
Thank you very much, Gillian, and thank you, Kathy. That's a wealth of information there. Hopefully you found it all very useful. But after the fact, if you think of other questions that you'd like to ask after our Q&A, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You have contact details there for both Crosscare Irish Diaspora Support Project based in Dublin and also ICANN based over in Canada. You have the general phone numbers for both, the general emails for both, but you also have our direct emails, and we would encourage you to reach out if you think of anything. There's no silly questions. If we don't know, we'll either find out for you or signpost you to someone who does. We'd also really encourage you to follow us on socials, and there's plenty of things going on. So both ourselves and ICANN are on Eventbrite as well, so follow us there, just in case there's anything that comes up you might find useful.